website so that you'll be able to Supply Chain Council website. Before we go too much farther, I'd like to introduce my co-presenter today, Alma Arales from PwC. PwC has become a critical partner for us in SCORmark benchmarking, and Alma is really the first point of contact for anyone who's doing benchmarking with SCOR. So if Alma, if you'll just introduce yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Thanks, Caroline. Hi, everyone. My name is Alma Arales. I am a senior associate in the PwC benchmarking group. I joined PwC 3 years ago with the PRCM acquisition. My background is in industrial engineering, but I have been doing supply chain benchmarking for the past 6 years. I lead the supply chain program in the benchmarking group with PwC, and I have been the main contact for the SCORmark service since April of 2013.
Thanks, Alma. Okay, so for the agenda for today, we're going to, it's a fairly aggressive schedule this morning, but I want to make certain that we do leave time to answer questions. It's really, this webinar is geared for those who at least have some familiarity with SCOR. So we're going to assume that you at least know what SCOR is, know the different components of SCOR. So we won't be spending a lot of time talking about SCOR specifically. It is geared also predominantly for those who have not participated in Supply Chain Council benchmarking before. So we're looking to be able to answer your questions on what do I benchmark and how do I make that happen. So we're going to start with why you benchmark. We're going to go through some very simple steps to doing the successful benchmarking. Alma's going to take you through the actual process of entering your data. And then we'll talk about what you do with the report, the benchmarking report, after you get it. So first, let's just talk about what is benchmarking, okay? Because so that we can make certain we're all on the same page when we talk about that. Because it's very interesting when you talk to people about benchmarking. People have different perceptions of what you mean by that term. And I think it goes back to the difference between what I call qualitative benchmarking and quantitative benchmarking. Qualitative benchmarking really focuses most on the best practices and comparison of those practices among organizations or maybe within an organization. How many practices do you have? What are the practices and how are they used? So many benchmarks use the best practices alone as for benchmarking, and they look to what they would consider the industry best and try to determine what they're using relative to what's being internally used in a company. The second we have is quantitative benchmarking. Quantitative benchmarking focuses on the measurement of some standard performance indicators and compares then that among organizations. This is the one that I think is the most familiar. So when I talk about benchmarking, and for the rest of the day when we talk about benchmarking, this is sort of what we're talking about. In this presentation, we're going to focus on a subset of qualitative benchmarking, and that's what we call competitive benchmarking. And that's basically focusing on looking at your quantifiers relative to your peers' quantifiers and trying to determine where you might have some relative gaps and what can you do to improve your performance based on what the market is requiring that you do right now. So why do you want to benchmark? Well, you can't manage what you don't measure. And many of you who've talked to me know that I am a proponent for making certain that you have metrics in your system that you're using to manage and to measure and manage what you're doing. Because if you don't know how you're performing relative to what the market is requiring and relative to what your competitive peers are doing, and you're not using some standard performance indicators, then there's going to be no way for you to really understand how well you're doing. So benchmarking helps you to use sort of some common terminology and a common language to sort of define what what it is you're trying to look at. What are the standard calculations? We want to make certain that when you benchmark, you're benchmarking apples to apples and not apples to oranges. So when you're benchmarking, you want to make sure that the performance measures that you're using are being calculated the same as the performance measures that your competitive peers are using. Oftentimes we will see companies that will measure a KPI using sort of a different calculation, and therefore their measurement is not really relevant or valid in terms of comparison. The other thing is you use benchmarks to sort of understand where you are. You can't determine where your performance issues are, your performance gaps are, if you don't really know where you're performing, both in comparison to others and where you're performing internally. So we use benchmarks to understand our performance. And then I think the most important thing that we use benchmarks for is to identify where do we have the opportunities for improvement. If we only have a certain amount of money to be able to spend to improve our performance, where are we going to target? Where's the most important thing? What's going to drop it really right back to our bottom line? And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along. All right. So benchmarking really supports then the development of a value proposition. And if you look at this particular graphic, and I know it's very busy, but one of the things that this particular performance benchmark graphics tells us is, where am I performing relative to a best-in-class scenario? Where, based on the numbers that I've gotten out of my system and the performance measures that I have been calculating, how am I doing? And if I were to improve, what would that do relative to annualized profit? And so in this particular graphic, what we're seeing is that places where there's opportunities for improvement, you can quantify and make a case for going to the budget committee or going to your CFO or going to your CEO and saying, we need to invest some money. If we invest the money right here, this is what we can expect as our return on our investment. And so that's one of the compelling value propositions of benchmarking. So we're going to spend a little time this morning kind of talking about what are the steps to doing this successfully. When I talk to people about benchmarking, which I do often, I think the biggest comment that I get back is just the fear of how long is it going to take me to do this? How much effort am I going to have to put in it? Do I need to hire a team of people to do it? Do I need to hire a consultant to do it? And so we're going to walk through some steps this morning that I think will show you that it's probably easier than you anticipate. We're going to look at how do you really identify what it is you're going to benchmark. How do you determine what are the strategic objectives around that benchmark? You know, what is my performance strategy relative to my customer's expectation? We'll talk about how you can use SCOR to help you select your metrics and provide a balanced scorecard. We'll talk about how do you collect data, where do you go, what are the sources for that data, what are, you know, where do I find the information that I need, and what happens if that information is not readily available? Well, I'm sorry. Then Alma's going to go over how you submit the data, how they do some validation and determine the eligibility for you to perform the benchmarking with PwC, and she's going to go over a little bit about what happens when you get your final report. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about identifying supply chain. I think one of the biggest misconceptions that we have when we talk about supply chain is that we don't always define supply chain the same way. So for this particular webinar, for this particular, and what the council is a proponent of, is that a supply chain is a group of processes, not organizations, not functions, but processes, which span the interactions from suppliers to customers. Okay, so it's all of the activities focused on the fulfillment of a customer order. So essentially, wherever there are materials or services flowing to an end customer, or from a customer in the instance of a return cycle, these are the processes involved in supply chains. Now, there are interactions with customers for sales to support the selection of materials and services, but it's not really directly involved in the flow of materials to end customers. So when we speak of benchmarking, supply chains, we're measuring the performances between the supply input and the customer output. All right. So the first thing you want to do when you're thinking about supply chains and how do I benchmark my supply chains and how do I identify my supply chains is to do something we call supply chain segmentation. Supply chain segmentation is basically looking at your customers and your products and using a tool that I'm going to show you in just a second called a supply chain definition matrix to determine the number of supply chains you have and the size of supply chains you have. So you're going to be looking at taking all of your product information and all of your customer information and using that then to identify what your supply chains are. So, for example, one of the first things that you'll want to do is you're going to want to determine what are your customers or your markets or your channels. Now, your sales folks or your marketing folks, they're going to be able to give this to you very quickly and very easily. They're going to be able to tell you, if you, how many customers, channels we have or how many markets we have. You can print out a sales report sometimes and you can get this information from, but you want to be able to subdivide into at least market channels and usually down to market to customer segments. So in this example, we are selling products both retail and commercial. So we have products that are sold directly to a retail operation, a store, and then we also had products that we sell to distributors or to other commercial type clients. All right. So two of the market channels then were retail and commercial. Now underneath that, you might also have some product groupings. For example, you might have a group of small. Let's assume we're selling something like an air conditioner. You might sell small window unit air conditioners. You might sell very large commercial air conditioners. You might have different groups even underneath these separate channels. So you want to be able to segment down to a level that makes sense. You don't necessarily want to go down to the individual product level because I think most of you will find that you'll have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different products, but you do want to make sure that whatever customer base you choose, they have all the same what we call fulfillment model. If they have different fulfillment models, then you're going to need to break those into different customer channels because some things we ship direct, some things we ship to a retailer. Some things we may only ship by truckloads. Some things we may ship partials. So there's different fulfillment models there for your customers. Now on the left-hand side of the matrix, you're going to see where we've actually begun to put what are our products. What do we sell? And so you look at that from lines of business. And you may also look at that from product groupings. Now, it's pretty easy. You can probably go to operations, or you can go to, you can go to your CFO. They can tell you, what your business lines or products are. So you also want to look at when you're putting in your products, you want to make sure that you at least segregate them, by build type or by production type. For example, if you've got products that are make to stock, you don't necessarily want to group that with products that are make to order because those are two very different supply chains. They're managed very differently. Their fulfillment models are different. So you want to make certain that when you're looking at that, you're dissecting your products down to a point where it makes sense and it's reasonable. So that's just the definition matrix. If you're looking at, I've got, 7,000, 7,000 products and I ship it to 4,000 customers. Again, you want to look at, is there any way that I can sort of group these supply chains together? Are there some logical groupings that fall out of that? For example, if you've got products that are made on the exact same equipment They're all either make-to-stock items, and do you ship them all the same way? Then you want to sort of group those products, because then that product will then make it what we call a logical supply chain. So you've got, so when you're looking at that, when you're looking at how do I group my products, how do I group what I do, you want to look at your build strategy. Do you make it? Do you buy it? You're going to have different types of supply chains for products that you make versus products that you just buy and resell. You want to look at your, whether it's a build to stock, build to order, or an engineer to order, because that's going to help you to sort of differentiate in your product groupings. You want to look at the life cycle of the product, because a lot of times you're going to be managing products that are at an end of life differently than you'll manage products in an introductory phase. You're going to have, different requirements. You're going to have different equipment needs for what we call end of life versus an introductory. And then when you're looking at your customer channels, you also probably want to look at, do I ship differently to different regions? Do I ship differently to do I have different customs requirements? Do I have different, regulatory requirements for certain products? Because that's also going to help you break out your products by supply chain. So once you've finished your supply chain matrix and you've identified, and I'm going to step back just a minute, every place that you have a customer and a product intersection, meaning this customer and I ship this product to this customer, you're going to put an X on your matrix. Okay, every one of these X's is a supply chain. Every one of them is something that, and so when you go to do your definition matrix, you may have literally dozens of supply chains. Even after you've done some product rationalization around it and some grouping around it, you may still come up with, wow, I have an awful lot of supply chains. So which one do I focus on? Because I know I probably can't fix all of them at the same time. I can't benchmark all of them at the same time. How do I figure out which ones I want to do? Well, not all supply chains are as valuable as others. So you're going to end up with a few that you really need to manage, but their volume and revenue are so small, or the strategic value is so small, that you really don't want to focus a whole lot of attention on benchmarking those. So, and conversely, you may also recognize that a few of your supply chains are absolutely vital to your business. And perhaps you've been sidetracked on some of the others that have, more problem, or their management's more vocal, or they're not as heavy hitters. So one of the things that we recommend now is that you use what we call supply chain prioritization. And you basically will take your supply chains that you've identified, and you're going to rank them based on certain features of them, such as size or complexity. You may also look at, what is the risk around this. So you set up your prioritization matrix, and you determine how you're going to rank each category. For example, we took the top 3 supply chains that we had identified in our supply chain definition matrix, and we wanted to look at them in terms of revenue, gross margin, SKUs, unit volume. We also put something in there called strategic value. This might be that we know this is a growth market, or we know this is that we've got the potential for, a huge influx of additional revenue based if we can pick up a different piece of market share. So for this example, we set each one of these up. We gave them each sort of an equal ranking, and we compare them relative to one another. So if we took the top 10 supply chains, for example, then you would basically rank them, 1 to 10 on, which is the biggest revenue producer, which is the biggest gross margin producer, which has the largest number of SKUs, 1 to 10, which do we do the largest unit volume on, 1 to 10. Something else you can do with this matrix is you can weight each one of these columns as well. So if you're really more interested in putting a higher weight on those that maybe bring you into larger gross margins, you may want to make that the weighting on that a little bit higher. But regardless, once you've ranked all of the supply chains or your top 10 or however many you decide that you're going to benchmark, then you can set this matrix up, give it some values, and determine what their overall ranking is relative to you, so that you'll know which one to start on first. So, for example, in this case, supply chain number 3, after we've gone through and done all of our ranking, supply chain number 3 has the lowest gross ranking mark. So we're going to start working on that supply chain benchmark first. All right. I think almost everybody's gone through some kind of prioritization or ranking exercise, so I'm not going to dwell too much time on that. All right. So now our focus is, we know which supply chains we're going to benchmark. We know the order that we're going to tackle them. Let's determine what it is we're going to put on our scorecard. How do we know which metrics to pick? How do we know which metrics are important? How do we know where our focus should be? Well, strategy for me is just another name for how do I prioritize my investments, okay? So if your strategy is to be, say, the best customer experience, that really means that all of your efforts, all of your investments in driving your supply chains need to be prioritized towards the best customer experience. Sounds simple, really, but the problem is, how do you define that strategy? Well, if you're familiar with SCOR, you know that SCOR provides 5 standard features of a supply chain, which, well, in my experience, can be used to identify virtually any realistic supply chain for any realistic strategy for a supply chain. The 5 features are reliability, which says, from my customer's perspective, have I delivered it on time, complete, with the right paperwork, and the best quality? Or responsiveness, which asks the question from the customer's perspective, how long does it take to fulfill my order? Flexibility looks at your ability to be able to scale up or scale down. You know, how much time is it going to take me if I get a 20% jump in my market? How long will it take me to scale up? If we see a huge economic downturn, how long, what is it going to cost me to scale down? Cost looks at your internal supply chain costs. These may or may not directly translate to product cost. Typically they will, but that says, do I compete based on on cost? Assets looks at how much capital investment does it take to make my supply chain operate. What kind of capital investment do I need? Okay, so assuming that you understand from your customer's perspective which one of those strategies is most important, then we're going to attach some information to it. All right, so you can prioritize a feature by saying you want your supply chain to be superior in that feature, or you want to have an advantage in that feature, or you want to be parity in that feature. This means, for benchmarking purposes, that if you want to be superior, say, in reliability, that you're going to perform in the top 90th percentile of your industry. So if there are 100 supply chains or 100 people that are operating in that supply chain, you want to be in the top 10 companies in competition. So if your customer tells you that reliability is the most important thing to us, then you want to make certain that you are performing in the top 10 for that. It doesn't say that you have 100% reliability. It says that if your leading competitors are up to, say, 80% reliable, then you're going to be at least 80% or better. So this is important because the relative advantage is why your customers will choose you. If you're better than your competitors, remember we're doing competitive benchmarking, then you're going to get chosen in a rational world. You don't have to be much better, you just have to be better. So you want to think of this as where do you want to be superior, better than 90%? Where do you think you want to have an advantage, better than 70%? And where do you know that you just have to be at least better than half of your competitors? Now, I know what you're thinking, because when I began with benchmarking, I thought the same thing. I want to be the best in all of them. The problem is you're competing for resources and you're competing for capital, and you need to be competing on the things that your customer cares about the most. Doesn't mean you don't care about the other performance measures. It just simply means that you're going to focus your attention on improving the measures in for this particular strategy. Okay, so we use something called supply chain strategy in 5 minutes to help us determine what business strategy is likely to be based on the business patterns that you're experiencing. So let me walk you through some decisions here real quick. First, let's look at make versus buy. Buy strategies usually focus on outsourced production, including outsourced inventory management, or no inventory maybe. It can be combined with different models, like it can be combined with build to stock or late life cycle. When you buy materials, your priority has already been set in assets, okay? In most cases, because you don't want to own the inventory and you don't want to manufacture, you don't want to have manufacturing plants or equipment. So if the build strategy is not relative, then you want to proceed to the model strategy, okay? And the model strategy says, am I an engineer to order? Am I build to stock, or am I build to order? So you want to take a look at each one of those because each has a different purpose within the supply chain, within your supply chain. If you're an engineer to order environment, cost, assets, and flexibility are generally not a competitive issue at all. So that leaves reliability and response. If you're build to order, then you have already made a decision to build to order. So you're holding little or no inventory. So reliability is paramount in these circumstances, right? So if you're a build to stock organization, then consider the life cycle of the material. You want to understand how the final planning strategy is influenced by what material you have. So you want to be able to look at, where am I in the life cycle, and where do I, if I'm build to order, I want to make certain that I manage my assets properly, and that I also have reliability because I want to be able to give to my customer when they've asked for the products. So in a build to order environment, your likely priorities are going to be in assets and reliability. Now with a build to stock strategy, you really have to kind of look at the product itself. Where is that product? Is it in a startup? Is it something that we've been producing for a while? We still have a significant market share on it. We have probably one of the only productions of this particular part, or is it something that's basically a commodity part? Everybody's making it, and or is it an end of life part? Are we getting ready to obsolete that? These decisions will help you determine what supply chain strategy is your priority. If you're in a startup, you're going to have to be able to adapt very quickly to some market fluctuations because you don't know exactly how the market's going to respond to the product. So you're going to want to have some pretty high performance in your flexibility metrics. If you're in a what we call a middle of life, you're going to really want to look at cost because you're going to want to make sure that you can compete, and also reliability. What is my order fulfillment? Am I able to fulfill orders? If you're in a commodity market where everything is where there's very low margins on a part or something you're producing, you're going to want to look at your cost metrics. You're really going to want to focus on those. Those are going to be a priority to you. So you're going to want to make sure you perform well in the cost section. And as you get more towards the end of life, you're not going to want to hold and manage and maintain a lot of inventory. You're getting ready to get rid of it, so you're going to want to look at your asset management a little bit better. So for each one of the supply chains that we identified, then what we want to do is we want to determine where do we need to have that top 10 performance. What is it that our customer cares most about? And that's where you're going to put what we call an S for superior. You're also going to identify where do I want to be performing in at least the top 30%. What of the 4 remaining supply chain strategies, what are the next 2 that are important to me? If I were to ask my customer what their secondary importance is, what would it be? And that's where you put A's, and then P's stand for parity. That means where I'm going to be in the top 50%. So when you're thinking about this, you really can only perform superior in one area. You're going to try to have an advantage in two areas, and you're going to try to perform in a parity relationship in two areas. Now, frequently, you're tempted to put 2 or 3 S's on there. That's just really not a good idea, okay? There's never a need to be superior in all facets of operations because customers really don't buy that way, even though we think they do. So products and markets generally focus on one thing at a time, and as competitors, when we're looking at trying to determine our scorecard and where we absolutely have to be superior, we want to make certain that we only put one S. Okay, so now we're going to use SCOR then to help us develop a scorecard. As most of you know, SCOR is built on hundreds of metrics, and those metrics have been defined as what we call level 1 metrics, level 2 metrics, and level 3 metrics. Now your SCOR manual provides all of the necessary definitions for each one of these measurements or metrics. It also tells you how to calculate it. It's also going to give you some great information on where do I go to get some of this data? Where should I be looking? What processes impact this particular performance metric? So as you're looking at your scorecard, you're going to want to make certain that in developing your scorecard and creating your scorecard, you want to make certain that you have at your disposal either your SCOR manual or potentially your online SCOR, which is on our website. So how do I create a balanced scorecard? Well, as I mentioned, SCOR has loads of metrics for you to look at. They have them developed in level 1, level 2, and level 3. Level 1 are your primary metrics for each one of the strategies that we've defined. Your level 1 metrics basically identify at the top level, things like perfect order fulfillment, order fulfillment cycle time. How do we calculate flexibility? How do we calculate our total cost to serve? Level 2 metrics are our diagnostic metrics, and they say if we want to be superior somewhere, what are the things that we really should be focusing on from a diagnostic standpoint to make certain that we are performing as well on a level 1 metric as we can. So in the example, and I know this is very difficult to see, but in the example of perfect order fulfillment, the level 2 metrics associated with that are what are the percentage of orders that we have delivered in full? What's our order fill rate? What's our delivery performance to customer commit? What's our quality rate or condition rate? What's our documentation accuracy? Those are your level 2 metrics. So you want to be able to, again, have this sort of handy at your side so that you can say, okay, I know that I have determined that I am going to be a superior performance in a certain area, so I want to look at, the metrics themselves and determine which metrics to pull, okay? So what you want to do for every place that you want to be superior, you basically want to look at level 1 metrics and level 2 metrics. So you would be interested in benchmarking level 1 and level 2 metrics to determine how you're performing relative to your competitors. Same for advantage. You want to make certain that you look at both level 1 metrics and level 2 metrics. But with parity, you probably only need to look at your level 1 metrics and that's it, okay? You can always get more data when you need it, but you want to make certain that you get enough when you get started that you have something so you have something to be able to start with in terms of making decisions around performance improvement, okay? So if you've never set up a scorecard, then you just basically need to say, okay, I've determined that for this supply chain, I want to be superior here, and here are the metrics that are associated with that, level 1 and level 2. So these are the things, this is the data that I want to calculate. You should come up with probably no more than 10 to 15 maybe metrics that you want to look at totally. Now, I want to give you a word of caution here, because one of the things that we run into with folks when they're benchmarking is that we tend to get into what I call analysis paralysis. And analysis paralysis means that we try to get down to nuts and bolts on every metric, every detail, everything. One of the things that I have suggested that companies do when they're starting their benchmarking is that you, at a minimum, you try to collect data around level 1 metrics, if possible. Now, Alma's going to go over which metrics you absolutely have to input. So you don't have to input all of the level 1 metrics, but you at least want to sort of attempt to do that. In the level 2 standpoint, you want to make certain that you only try to go and collect the data on level 2s where you see a performance issue on level 1. Okay, so you want to, one of the first things that I typically recommend when companies are going to go through benchmarking is determine which metrics are important to you from a strategic standpoint. We just went through strategy. And then go back and benchmark the level 1 in that relative to that. Once you get your report back, you can take a look and see if you have a performance issue relative to your competitor. If you have a performance issue relative to your competitor on a metric that you feel like you should have a superior or advantage rating on, then you probably need to go back and do a second run with your benchmarking and benchmark the level 2 metrics around those as well. If you get your report back and you're already outperforming your competitive peers, then there's really no reason for you to go back and do any additional work to determine how you're performing relative to the level 2 metrics. I worked with a company one time, and they spent an enormous amount of time collecting data on level 2 metrics for the area where they wanted to be superior. And only to find out when they finally did get their benchmarking report back, they were 3 or 4 points ahead of their competitors in performance as it was. So the amount of time that they expended to collect the information for level 2, for the level 2 metrics, really wasn't going to buy them anything, because improving their performance there wasn't going to give them any additional competitive advantage. So I just sort of caution you on that. All right, I have a question here. We're in the process of deploying SAP supply chain performance metrics, which are delivered using SCOR. By nature of the fact that we're doing that, would we still need to use this type of matrix? Are perfect order and order fulfillment cycle times take into account product information? No, if you're already using a tool that basically does what I identified in terms of looking at the life cycle and the build cycle and whatnot, you don't have to go through that exercise. All right, so once you've got your scorecard put together, then you have to determine who owns the data, and you have to begin looking at data gathering. This is the longest process in benchmark, and because of that, I think the more planning that you do, the faster and more successful you're going to be in your benchmarking. So I would suggest that you create what I call a detailed data gathering plan to organize the data, organize what is needed, and organize a plan to alert the organizations that you will be gathering the data from, so that they will be prepared knowing that you're coming to them. Okay. Most of the time, organizations take a lot of early organizing to gather data, particularly in places where you don't have an ERP data point, or one that you have to collect manually. So for each metric, SCOR provides a set of processes which holds the transactional data that you can use to calculate that metric. So if you go into SCOR and you look at a particular metric, it's going to give you some information on who's the owner of that data, or who should be the owner of that data. And so that way you can begin to look at, okay, these processes own that data, so who is the owner of those processes? You know, who is the contact person for that? Who do I need to go to so that I can notify them that I am coming to get this particular piece of data, and I can ask them how easy or in some cases not easy it is to get the data. Okay, so you can The more detailed and the better you do at planning your data gathering, the easier it's going to be for you to collect and implement the benchmarking. Okay, so I can't stress enough how really important data gathering is. Now, a lot of your data, is relatively easy to get. Financial data, you can get that typically from your financial team, your controller, your CFO, if you're looking for that. Company data and cost center data and other data you can get in other reports that are available. Some of them, are available even publicly. Your non-financial or your operational data, look at contacting your customers to get you some information on delivery performance. Contact your internal customers to look at cycle time performance. Work with your operational people. Your IT people can help you identify, and your operational people, how to pull specific things out of whatever ERP system you're using or whatever manual system you're using. If you're looking at things relative to supplier delivery, you can work with your suppliers to look at that. Sometimes we've had companies that will work with their 3PLs to get some additional logistics type data. All of the data is available. Somebody's got it. You just have to figure out, who that is. All right. So once you've created your scorecard, you've collected your data, you're ready to go. Then you basically have the information now that you need to be able to perform the benchmark. So you're ready to input your data and then have it, be reviewed, and then to get your benchmarking report back. So for this section, I'm going to turn it over to Alma, and Alma's going to describe for you what are the steps that you now have to go through to be able to enter your data, get your report, and then what does it, once you get your report. So Alma, I'm going to now turn it over to you.
Thanks, Carolyn. Well, first of all, I want to talk about the PwC benchmarking database. And as you can see here, we have a sample of the companies, the type of companies that we have in our database. We have over 750 companies. That means more than 1,000 supply chains. We cover various industry segments like aerospace and defense, automotive and industrial, computers, consumer goods, electronic equipment, energy, chemicals, and applied materials, medical devices, semiconductor, and telecom. We have a very robust database. We have been doing this for many, many years. So when you get your report back, these are the type of companies that are going to be as part of your peer group. You can move to the next slide. Yes. So what are the steps to complete SCORmark? Well, the first thing that you need to do is to request access to SCORmark. That is very easy. In the Supply Chain Council page, you can find the email link to contact us directly. You just need to request for access to the Supply Chain SCORmark service. We ask you to identify the supply chains that you're going to be benchmarking. So you can do business units, or you can do different divisions. You can do as many supply chains as you want, and I think it's a good exercise for you to determine which ones are important to you and which ones you want to benchmark. You need to determine the strategic objectives that you have, and then collect the metrics data. And these are things that Carolyn already talked about. So once you have all that, then you enter the data and then submit. We'll validate your submission, and then you'll get a final report. And the final report you will get within 2 weeks of submitting the data. And of course, there's going to be a validation process in between, and your name will be added to the SCORmark database. Moving on to the next slide. Well, these are just screenshots so you can see how easy it is to access our website and to start entering your data. So all you have to do is go to the link that we're going to provide when we send you back the login instructions, your username and password. We're also going to send you an FAQ document, and we really recommend that you read that document. There are a lot of questions that are going to be answered there, and probably things that you didn't even think about, but it's really helpful to read that document. So all you have to do is come to our site, enter your username and your password, and then get started with the process. So to start filling out your questionnaire, all you have to do is click on the Enter Data button, as you can see here, highlighted in green, and then it will take you through your survey. So once you're here, so in the organization dropdown, if you were completing this for more than one supply chain, you would see the different divisions or business units in the dropdown. If you have access to just one, then you would just see one. But then all you have to do basically is click on the link and then start entering data. All of your data will be saved automatically, so you don't have to worry about losing your data or being timed out or anything like that. The first thing that you have to do once you start, once you click on the survey link, is to accept the terms and conditions. You have to do this just once, and then after that, you're good to go. Then the first page that we have is the introduction and instruction, and it's basically just an overview and recommendations on how to enter the data and the data collection period that we're asking for, all helpful information that is going to help you through the data collection process. And then after that, basically just get started. So we have a demographic information, so name, title, company, all that, just basic information about the person completing the survey and about the company. And if we move to the next slide, well, this is a very important question, and Carolyn talked about this. So we have different sections, right? We have 10 sections or 10 pages for the entire survey. That includes the terms and conditions, the demographic information, and we also have financials, costs, asset management, and others. We ask you to complete, or the required sections that we ask you to complete are the demographic information, the industry segmentation and financials, and the cost section. And then we also ask you to choose at least one of the other different sections in responsiveness, agility, asset management, and reliability. These will give us the basic information or the basic data that we need to populate our database, but it will also give you the best results when you get your report back. If we move to the next slide.
I think this is a good place to jump in and also remind them that all of the data that you submit is 100% completely confidential, meaning the Supply Chain Council and any other member in the Supply Chain Council will never see your data in any other form except maybe an aggregate form if we do an industry slice on benchmarking. So when putting in your cost information and your financial information, please note that is kept completely confidential. And in addition, no one else gets a copy of your final report except you. So I think that I know that question comes up a lot, especially when we're talking about financial information.
Yeah, that's a good point. So yes, all the information is confidential. We're not going to share that information, and the report is only for the company, so no one else will see it. So as I mentioned before, there are 10 pages in the survey that includes financial costs, etc. We do have validation options, and you can use that while you're entering data. And what does that mean? Well, when you hit the validation option, basically it would flag something that is maybe out of range according to what we've seen for the industry or over the years of experience that we have. So for example, if you enter your revenue as just 100, well, it will flag you that maybe there is something wrong. Well, clearly there's something wrong, but it will flag you things like that. And it's a good feature to use. Once you have entered your data, you just click on the Submit button, and then the moment we receive the notification that you have submitted your data, we will contact you just to let you know that the data has been submitted. We'll start the validation, and then we will contact you as needed if we have any questions, if we need clarification on some of the data provided. And then we're going to do that exercise as much as we need to. Once there are no more questions and we're sure that the data is good, we're going to accept it into the system and add your name to the database. And then we'll proceed to create your benchmarking report, which will be emailed to you in a PDF version within about 2 weeks of accepting the data.
Alma, there's been a question that says, is there a place that a company or a person can see the industry segmentation being used?
It's part of the FAQ document. Basically, I just cover everything that we have. So A&D, auto, industrial, computers, consumer goods, electronics, equipment, chemicals. But it's part of the FAQ document, and the list that we showed you here, it's also in the FAQ document.
Okay, so if you want additional information on the industry segmentation, there is an FAQ document that you can get to your access. And we're going to provide you with contact information at the end of this webinar so that you'll be able to contact either one of us as well.
Yes. Okay, so let's show you a sample report. So what are you going to get back? You're going to get back a report that includes 4 slides. The first slide is a demographic breakdown of the industry you're being compared against. So you can see the industry breakdown, the revenue size, and the capability model. In this case, this sample is for a consumer goods company, and 100% of the companies in the population are consumer goods. You can see the revenue size for the companies in the population, and then you can see in this particular case that 50% of the companies in the population are stock product and 50% of the population is made to order. So this is the first slide that you get. Then the second slide is the level 1 metric in SCORcard format. So this is what Carolyn was talking about. So you can see metrics by attributes. You can see the parity, advantage, and superior benchmark for the population. You can also see what is the target level performance that you want for that particular metric, what is your performance, and then what is the gap, if there is a gap, to be at that level performance that you want to see. The third slide, it's a data table format of some of the level 2 metrics. So as you can see, we have some financial metrics. We have the level 2 details of the cash-to-cash cycle metrics, and we also cover the forecast accuracy metrics. And then finally, the fourth slide is a complexity scorecard. So in the survey, we have a section about complexity. This is not going to show you that you're doing good or bad. This is more about the complexity of your supply chain. Do you have higher products than the population or lower products? So this is just measuring the complexity of your supply chain with this different perspective. And I think that is my last slide. So Carolyn, back to you.
Okay, so once you've gotten that report, and I'm going to actually skip back up to the actual report itself, you need to sort of look at what do you do with this. So on this particular scorecard, one of the things that we noticed is that the company wanted to have a superior target level performance in cost. And so when they input their cost information or their cost data, what they found out is that their organization was really performing, was underperforming in that particular metric. So specific to what they want to do or specific to the targets that they want to achieve, they're underperforming to those targets. So the first thing that they're going to need to do is to begin to look at diagnostics around that to determine why are we underperforming, what are we not doing correctly. And so one of the things that they actually did was they put in their level 2 performance metrics so they can begin to see where are they underperforming and where are they overperforming and where do they need to target some attention. An example, I mean, we can look at this and say, okay, in this organization, their days of sales outstanding is 90, and somebody who wants to be superior in this area has about, or of the people that have entered their data, looking at best in class, superior performance only have about 31 days of sales outstanding. So we then want to go back to SCOR and go back to the processes that that are relative to this, or the processes that impact this particular metric. I mean, that's very easy to do, either in your book or online, and determine, you know, what is it that, how is that metric calculated, and what is it that we're not doing. And let's begin to look in these process areas and determine what we're not doing. So you may then want to do more of a quantitative, a qualitative type benchmark, and look at what are the practices that are being performed in that area. What are we doing? What are we not doing that the system says other companies are doing? Are there things that we need to be, you know, implementing that will enable us to become better at our cash to cash, you know, cycle time, or, you know, in our cost metrics. Okay. All right. So, you know, in conclusion, because I know that there's probably some questions out there, and we are running right up against the 1 hour mark. Benchmarking really is just an opportunity to help you identify how do you transform your supply chain to be what you want it to be. So it helps you to understand and make the case, business case, for improvement, operational improvement. There may be IT solutions. There may be you know, relationship solutions that you have to work with your customers or your suppliers. There's a lot of different things that it helps you to look at, learn, and develop a strategy around how am I going to transform the supply chain so that I can compete in the market and compete better in the marketplace. So how does SCOR, you know, help you? SCOR gives you the standard processes. It gives you a standard language. It gives you standard metrics. It gives you, you know, some information on benchmarks, human skills, human talent that you need. So the benchmarking identifies, and then SCOR is going to help you in improving that. It's going to help you look at how do you measure, what are you measuring, and how, you know, how well are you performing, so that you can then see where your true opportunities are. It helps you compare your performance. It helps you compare your processes. It helps you compare your practices. All right. So remember, my mantra is, if you don't measure it, you can't manage it, and it will ultimately manage itself. And that is not a good thing. Most of you that are operations know the less attention we pay to it, the more out of control it can get. So I'm going to open now the floor to discussion. I'll be happy to unmute everybody, or you can type in your question if you would prefer. But I'm happy to answer questions. There was a question earlier about whether or not all of this would be available. Yes, the slides will be available. They will come to you in the link that that you get for this recording. I can also send you separately a version of these slides. All right. So we're now all. I think we're all unmuted. Well, no, we're not. I don't know why. Hang on a minute. Okay. See how this works. All right, so I've unmuted everyone. Oh, I'm getting an echo, so unfortunately I'm going to have to go back and remute, and we'll have to use a question has come across: what level of support do you give companies that are members of the Supply Chain Council in terms of getting the SCORcard set up? In other words, do we offer guidance and counsel to individual companies? The answer to that is absolutely. We are happy to work with you. We are not a consultancy, so we're not going to come in and, you know, run a consultancy type relationship. But as you're going through the process of developing your SCORcard and you have questions, we are delighted to answer them at any point in time. You can send them to me, and I can get a team here to take a look at them, and we'll get a response back to you. As a matter of fact, we do that fairly regularly with companies that are benchmarking. Do we have any other questions? I realize that wait a minute, yeah, we got one coming in right now. Let's see. Who's the best person to contact? I'm glad you asked that question. Here's the contact information. I am the central point of contact for North American members with the Supply Chain Council. So if you want to email me, you can do that. That's usually the easiest way to get a question answered. If you have a question specific to data entry on the benchmark, or about how to possibly understand what your report is saying to you, or you've got a validation issue of some sort, Alma is probably the first point of contact at PwC, and she'll be able to help you with that. Is there anything else? All right. Again, I encourage you to contact me if you have any questions. I do realize that this is an enormous amount of information to take in an hour. We really want you to encourage you to use the SCORmark benchmarking product. It's just incredibly powerful. And I think that once you get into the process, you're going to find out that it's not nearly as difficult as you think. We typically see companies spending 6, maybe 8 weeks to try to get the benchmarking done. A lot of that time is spent in the planning of the data gathering and in the data gathering itself, because we realize that any type of analysis is sort of secondary typically to operations. So that's usually the reason it takes that long. We've seen companies complete it, big companies complete it in as little as 2 to 3 days, and we've seen big companies get into analysis paralysis and never finish it. So we just want to make sure that that you feel you have the support. You do with PwC, you do with the Supply Chain Council. We encourage you to use the product, and to if you are a consultant, and I think this is a disclaimer I need to tell you just before we sign off. If you are a consultant, you are not able to submit the data on your client's behalf. The data has to be submitted from members of the Supply Chain Council. Now, you can encourage your customer to become a member of the council, and then you can assist them with entering their data. But we don't. We no longer allow consultants to submit data on behalf of their clients. So part of that is from wanting to make sure we maintain confidentiality, and the other is that we want to make certain that we have companies participating that are going to take it and use the data, and so that's the choice that was made. Any other questions? All right. Well, I really appreciate everybody's time and attention this morning. I hope that you found something of value of this. Again, you will receive a link to this recording itself. I will make a point to send you directly the slides so that you have them at your disposal to go over. When you're going over them, if there's something that you don't understand or something I wasn't clear on, please don't hesitate to contact me and let me know. Alma, did you have anything else that you wanted to say before we finished? Okay, well, then we will call it a day. And again, thanks everybody for attending.